Joining me now is J.D. Scholten. He's running in Iowa's 4th District. If you don't recognize that district, you will likely recognize its incumbent, the loathsome, hideous Steve King. So JD, first of all, welcome to Rebel Headquarters.
Oh, it's an honor to be here, Cenk, and yeah, just a big fan, and thank you for having me on.
Oh, thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Now, you've been endorsed by a lot of folks, including Bernie Sanders, and as many progressive groups almost as there is out there. And so I know you're fighting the good fight. So now let's talk about Steve King for a second, because I want people to understand how important this race is. So sometimes Steve King is called a white supremacist. Now, he's a member of Congress, so that might seem extreme if you don't know his record. But what are some of the things that Steve King has done or said that perhaps earned that title in some people's minds?
Oh, I mean, he just look at his tweets, and they're pretty self-explanatory. We have the famous one from not this past March, but a year and a half ago, where he said we can't restore our civilization with other people's babies, and there's just a lot of things like that it doesn't represent the 4th District. And I have friends who aren't from Iowa, who aren't very political, and they text me every time he does something like this. And finally, we just said enough is enough, and we're changing the narrative of who's coming out to vote, and changing the narrative of this district.
So, in case you guys didn't see those tweets, Steve King wrote, Wilders, who's another questionable character to say the least, understands that that culture and demographics are our destiny. He said, we can't restore our civilization with somebody else's babies. What does that mean? Whose babies? And when you say demographics is our destiny, okay, the same question I asked Doug Carlson or anybody else, why? What's wrong with that? In another tweet, he said, diversity is not our strength. Who do you mean we are?
Right.
Right? So it's not your strength because you're a white supremacist. Yeah, you hate diversity, I get it, right? But for the rest of us, we're all Americans.
Right, and I was blessed enough to play professional baseball earlier in life, and I mean, diversity is the strength of any team, and it is the strength of America too. And so he's just, we're tired of his extreme point of view and his personal agenda, and he's abdicated his leadership after being in Congress for 16 years for his own personal agenda.
I mean, and it's such and they don't get it. It's such a point of privilege to be able to say, I don't like your diversity. Like, what? I don't even know what that means. So, all right, imagine if African-American politician came out and said, yeah, I don't like diversity. So it should only be black people in power. You'd be like, what? What? Right?
So, that's exactly right.
So, all right. Now, look, this is a district, though, that has gone for Steve King by over 20 points several times. So how do you win in a district like this? And look, if you're standing from our position outside of that district, we worry that district likes that kind of talk. So, JD, what's your take on it, and how do you plan to beat him?
Well, I mean, it just goes to show how far out of touch he is with the district, because this district is reliant on an immigrant workforce, and his extreme anti-immigration stances don't align with this district. And before, we would always used to hear, oh, that's just Steve being Steve, like he's that crazy uncle. But we don't hear that anymore. We hear like that letter you mentioned earlier, that comment you mentioned earlier of a lifelong Republican who's finally just said enough is enough, and we're seeing that throughout this district. And so what we did was we really modeled our campaign after my two political heroes. And in 1984, and I know that's a while ago, but 80% of this district, what is now the 4th District, was represented by Tom Harkin and Berkeley Bedell. And they were two wonderful populist Democrats, And we modeled our campaign after what they do and what they did, and it was get out there to the people. And we are currently on our third 39 county tour. It's a major district, it's huge, and we're doing a town hall in all 39 counties, and we call it the Can't Fake Showing Up Tour. And we are just getting crowds and crowds. And earlier today we were blessed to have an event down in Boone County, a rural county, and we had over 150 people show up. And last week, in a county that Hillary Clinton didn't even get 30% in the 2016 election, we had over 182 people, almost 200 people showed up. And it wasn't all just Democrats. And people are fed up, and we're creating this movement, and it's pretty special to be part of.
So you mentioned you played baseball. I gotta say, I love that you played for the Saskatoon Legends in Canada. I didn't know they played baseball out there. And you played baseball in Belgium, Germany, and France.
Yeah.
Putting the kidding aside about Canada, I really didn't know they played baseball in those countries.
Yeah, it was. I'll be honest, I didn't make a dime doing it, but it's for the love of the game, and it's when it's in your heart, it's pretty special, and that's the same with this campaign. I knew how hard a work it would be to take on an 8-time incumbent, but when it's fun, it makes everything easier. And what we've seen is a race that's traditionally 22 points. We've seen a national poll had us within 10, and then our poll shows within 6. And both the national and this poll shows that the only limitation is our name recognition. And so we're executing our game plan right now. We're going to blitz the airways with ads and newspaper and radio and all that jazz. And we're continuing to get out to all 39 counties. And everything we see, this race, when I first launched and went on our first 39 county tour, everyone thought was unwinnable. And it's going to come down to razor thin margins.
Well, what's helping your name recognition a little bit is Ben and Jerry's did a contest. You were among the 7 people that they wanted to name ice cream flavors after, and that is concluded. And I love your ice cream flavor, at least the name. They haven't sent me a pint yet, so let them know. Anyway, Scholten's Grand Slam home run. Okay, that's awesome. And like I said, you were a Saskatoon legend. And if you beat Steve King, then you'll really be a legend. So, but before we let you go, though, I did want to ask you about policy. You have, and unsurprising given your district, but as your top priority, building a sustainable rural economy. And I wanted to ask you about that because, all we ever hear about is nonsense. It's, I'm going to help the small farmers. What it means is giant tax giveaway to the richest people in the country and using farmers as a shield. So, but how would you help farmers build sustainable economy in your district?
Well, there's 2 parts of it. One, we need to add technology into this district, and if you go onto any farm right now, you will see that the technology that's on the farms right now are absolutely amazing, and but they're only using a small portion of what they could potentially be using, and so getting quality internet access to all farmers is a must to every Iowan. But the other part of it is the amount of market consolidation. And you're talking about like the Bayer Monsanto merger and all those things have really just squeezed farmers. And anytime you take a market option out of the marketplace, you add cost to the farmer and you add pressure to the farmer, and they're wearing it on the input and output side. And man, I could talk all day about this, but that's just one of the many things. And this is even before we even talk about tariffs and how we're bearing the brunt of what's happening. And it's one thing that farmers are really resonating with, and King's pretty weak on that. He's not on the Farm Bill Conference Committee, 16 years in Congress, and he's missed 39% of the farm or the agriculture committee hearings, and he's missed 82% of the small business committee hearings, and he's just really abdicated his leadership for his own personal agenda, and people are fed up.
Yeah. And of course, his buddy Donald Trump has devastated the farming community. All right, everybody check out Scholten. Go to ScholtenForIowa.com. That's, of course, with the number 4, ScholtenForIowa.com. If you're watching later on YouTube or Facebook, all those links will be down below. So you can click on them easy. Donate or volunteer. It makes a huge difference, especially against a candidate backed by corporations like Steve King. So, J.D. Scholten, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Cenk. Have a great night.
On the go? Don't worry, we got you covered. You can still listen to TYT at our new podcast network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or at tyt.com/podcast.